Yo guys, how are we all doing today? It's Fanfic Reader here. I am very sorry for being late on this one. I would have done it last week, but I was kind of busy for the weekend, so my schedule was kind of fucked. But I apologise for that. But don't worry, we are back with Avengers of Steel, Chapter 6, Breaking News. I hope you guys all enjoy it. You ready? Let's do this. If there was one thing that S.H.I.E.L.D. took seriously, it was experiments to make an enhanced soldier. Not that there were many things that S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't take seriously, but they had a particularly strong focus when experiments that could lead to the creation of super soldiers inevitably appeared. It wasn't hard to guess why, given S.H.I.E.L.D.'s founders dealing with Captain America, or maybe even more relevant, their dealings with Johann Skirmit, the Red Skull. They knew since their beginning how dangerous a super soldier could be when fighting for the wrong side and how vulnerable they were when fighting for their own side. So, when S.H.I.E.L.D. systems flagged a call made to the New York Police Department where the caller spoke about a lab that was making experiments on people trying to turn them into mutants, there was a metaphorical code red alarm shrieking all over the Triskelion. The chance of this being a prank call was considered high at first, but soon after the caller gave his name, the address of the supposed lab, and said he would leave his cell phone on so they could track it there quicker, there were already agents on the move. The first agents actually got there together with the cops and were first to take control of the situation and isolate the place. Several black cars were stopped at the factory's entrance alongside police cars and ambulances. People in suits were everywhere, taking pictures of every little inch of the place, and the cops that responded to the call were guarding the perimeter. That was the scene that greeted Clint Barton when he arrived and crossed the perimeter line to enter the factory. Usually the famous Hawkeye wouldn't be called to deal with a solved situation. His abilities were normally directed at problems that needed solving before they could become unsolvable. However, the threat of a super soldier factory inside New York was reason enough for him to be called out of his bed in the middle of the night. The place looked abandoned, even if it was crawling with people at the time. Old, badly maintained and dirty. The second room he entered, however, was far worse. Even if it looked newer, the place was destroyed. Machines and barrels tossed everywhere, walls cracked, the catwalk falling on top of everything, and a big deal steel door that apparently led to an elevator that was twisted in weird angles. There was even a hole in the ground right behind it where it was possible to see parts of the floor below. He entered the elevator and went down, following the instructions of the agents already there, where he was expected by Maria Hill. "Took you long enough, it's almost morning," she greeted without even looking at him. "Well, you know, traffic in New York is a disaster," Clint answered. "You arrived in a helicopter," Maria pointed out. "And a damn slow one, apparently. We should complain to Fury." She rolled her eyes and Clint smiled, looking around. "So, what we got here?" he asked. Maria approached and showed a few pictures to him on the tablet. "Mutant Factory. Are you familiar with Dr. Daniel O'Keefe's thesis on the possibility of artificially activating the X gene in non-mutants?" she asked. "Wow, yeah, like, so much," Clint deadpanned. She didn't smile. In simple terms, they were forcing non-mutants that had the X gene to activate it via serum and several rounds of torture. Clint's jaw dropped slightly. Are you for real, torture?" Maria sighed. "Unfortunately." She began to show him the pictures, the equipment, the wounded people, a few of the medical evaluations, images of ongoing tortures. Clint had seen a lot of vile things in his job, but there was always some bad guys out there who managed to take it a little bit further on the villain scale. "Please tell me we got the guy who did this," he said. "We got some of them, Dr. O'Keefe and a few henchmen, but I doubt this is it. He couldn't have had the money to pull or fund this on his own." "Were they successful?" Clint asked. "Sometimes. The serum is apparently not finished, but some of the patients responded well. The vast majority, however, couldn't handle the stress of the serum and what was needed to make the serum work. We don't have the numbers yet, but a lot of people died here." "So what happened then?" Clint asked. Maria pointed at someone. Clint followed her finger to see a guy sitting on a table nearby. Young guy, big, dark hair, blue eyes. Not a part of S.H.I.E.L.D. or the police. Not a patient of this lab, given his lack of injuries. And not one of the criminals, given that he was not handcuffed. "That's Clark Kent, a 21-year-old aspiring journalist," recited Agent Hill. He was the one who made the call to the police that was intercepted. According to him, he was investigating Dr. Okamura and followed him here, at which point he heard a commotion. Yelling, gunshots, things being broken. When there was no sound anymore, he risked entering to find a place like this. He thinks it might have been one of the mutants managing to escape. Clint eyed Clark for a long minute, studying his face, his gestures, trying to get a read on him. He was no Black Widow, but he had his moments. "You believe him?" he finally asked. "He checks out. First thing I did, he arrived in New York a few days ago, visited a lot of newspapers trying to find a job, just rented an apartment, and frankly, he doesn't strike me as someone who could do the things these men were doing here," she admitted, shrugging. "Maybe not, but it doesn't strike me as a normal guy either. Don't know why. He's just too relaxed. Well, he is here for a while now. Adrenaline burns out eventually. I'm gonna have a talk with him, Clint said, starting to walk towards Clark. His eyes did not leave Clark for 1 second as he approached, still struggling to understand the man in front of him. Something just didn't feel right. The room was full of agents running around. The lab still had all of its torture equipment in it. He was just briefed by Maria Hill herself, and yet he didn't have the appearance of a man that had just busted a mutant factory. He had a nervous expression, but not the kind of nervous a person would be in this situation. It was more like the kind of nerves a guy would have just before doing an exam in high school. "Hey," he greeted, Clark turning to look at him. "I'm Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye," Clark completed, smiling and extending his hand. "I know, I'm a fan." He smiled in response, shaking the guy's hand. "Am I your favourite Avenger?" He joked. "Well, you're my second favourite." "Please don't tell me Stark is your first, I couldn't bear the thought." "No, though that armor's pretty cool, my favourite one is actually Black Widow. But not for the reasons you're thinking," he hastily added. Clint raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what reasons would I be thinking?" "Well, I mean, she's very..." Clark stammered, clearing his throat. "I mean, she's human, just a regular woman, and yet she's fighting beside a god, the Hulk, a legendary super soldier, and a man with the best technology in the world. If that's not an example of hard work, determination, and pure badassery, then I don't know what is." "Hey, I do that too. Why am I not your favourite Avenger?" Clark just smirked. "Well, I mean, she's just way harder." Clint actually laughed. Natasha would love this. He would have to remember to tell her. "So, I know they've probably asked you the same questions 1,000 times, but could you answer some for me now?" he asked, sitting at the table. "Sure, no problem. Maria told me you're following Dr. Okamura." "Why?" "I've had a tip." "Who gave you this tip?" "You know I can't tell you. If I do, then I'll lose my source. But I can tell you that it's no one important. Just a 2-bit criminal. He told me that the word going around was that someone was paying for anyone who was kidnapped. He had an address, so I went there. I saw Dr. Okamura, so I began to follow him." "Just like that?" "Well, he seemed to be in charge. Not sure if he was actually the boss, but he was definitely not a thug or prisoner. Therefore, he was someone worth following." "And what about that?" Clint asked, pointing to the hole in the ceiling. "Did you see the one who did that?" "Nope." "Nothing at all?" "Look, the one who did this is strong. He or she broke concrete and destroyed a steel gate as thick as a bank's vault door. Whoever it is, people might get hurt." He kept looking at Clark, evaluating his expression. "I didn't see anything. But I'm sure the one who escaped is not a bad person," Clark confirmed, meeting Clint's eye. "And how can you be so sure of that?" Clint demanded. "Mr. Barton, look, you arrived here just now. I didn't. When I got here, this lab was full of people in pain, scarred, traumatized, and I was nauseated with what I saw. And yet the one who escaped didn't kill a single person. I checked. If that doesn't prove we're dealing with a good person, then I don't know what does." Well, that was a fair point, Clint supposed. If the one who did all of this was really a mutant escaping, the fact that all these people were spared told a lot about his or her character. Even so, there was one thing that was bothering Clint. "Agent Hill told me you've moved to New York recently," he began. "Yeah, just yesterday." "Where did you live before?" "Smallville." "No, seriously, where did you live?" Clark just kept looking at Clint, unamused, until he understood that Clark wasn't joking. "Oh! So, Smallville, huh? Must have been quite the change." "A little bit, yeah, but I haven't been here too long to feel it." "But apparently you've been here long enough to have sources that give you tips about people being kidnapped." Clark stopped in his tracks and looked at Clint. "Well, would you look at that? Now who's the one who didn't know squat about interrogation, Nat?" "Well, you're right, Mr. Bond," Clark admitted. "I don't exactly have sources. Not yet, anyway." "Then how did you know about this place?" "I was going back home at night after a very long day trying to find a job. And right after I had dinner, I saw a van stop in the middle of the sidewalk. A guy shot out, hit a homeless person in the face. He was drunk, probably didn't even see it coming, and then started to drag him inside the vehicle. I helped. How? And more importantly, why?" "What do you mean, why? The guy was being kidnapped. What kind of person would it be if I just did nothing?" "Well, most likely a kind of person who had a lot less chance of being shot in the head," Clint thought. But to his surprise, he actually believed the guy. The way he said it. It was like he really believed it to be unthinkable not to help someone in that situation. "But how did you help him?" "I snuck up behind him and I punched him. I'm not a martial artist like you, but I've been working on a farm since I was a kid. It's better than going to the gym." He gave a little smile. After the homeless man escaped, I made some questions to the guy and he admitted he was kidnapping people for someone else and he gave me the address. "Why didn't you tell us this to begin with?" because the police usually disapproves of people hitting each other in the face, and I didn't want to be arrested. Clint stared at him seriously for a moment. But this wasn't Clint Barton anymore. This was Hawkeye. The agent who had killed dozens of Chitauri in the Battle of New York. The assassin who had made a career in dispatching bad people. The Avenger. Is that all you have to tell me? Are you sure you're not leaving anything out? He asked, his voice no longer nice and calm, but dry and serious. Clark met his eyes without even flinching. Yes, I'm sure. It was in that moment that Clint realized he was right. There was something very strange about this guy. But he didn't think he had anything to do with what was happening here. But he was absolutely sure that there was more than meets the eye when it comes to Clark Kent. Before he could say anything else, however, Maria Hill approached and dropped some papers on the table, looking at Clark. This is a non-disclosure agreement, she said. It says that you can't talk about what happened here with an outside party, and I highly recommend you sign it. Clark looked at her, a little nervous. What happens if I don't sign it? He asked. We're not going to arrest you, Mr. Kent, or do anything outside the law. But this is an ongoing investigation. If you don't sign it, we will have to take legal measures to force you to sign it anyway. This is just quicker, Maria explained. He began to pursue the thick document, turning the pages too fast to actually be reading anything. But what about the people I already told? He asked. I mean, I talked to a lot of people on the phone until you guys showed up. Nobody wants to believe me about this. We can't do anything about the people you've already spoken to for obvious reasons, but at the moment you sign this, anyone you talk to will be covered by this contract, Maria clarified. So don't worry about it. We won't take any legal measures because of the past. Clark looked at her and smiled. Okay then, and without any additional words, he signed. So, can I go home now? Maria looked at Clint and he nodded. You're free to go. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I hope you catch whoever did this. And with this, he left. Clint's eyes didn't leave him until he entered the elevator and disappeared. That guy was weird, he stated a minute later, turning around to look at Maria. So are you, Maria answered and smiled at his fake glare. But why are you saying this? Do you think he has something to do with this? No, I don't, but there's something about him. My instincts, they're trying to tell me something, and I just don't know what. Are you sure you're not hungry? Asked a familiar voice behind him. Natasha told me to ask you if you've been eating well. She said you usually forget to eat when she's not here to take care of you. Clint opened a big smile and turned around to see Steve Rogers, the Captain America himself, approaching without the shield, dressed in normal clothes, but still Captain America. Hey, Cap. What are you doing here? I thought you were in Washington, he asked, shaking his hand. Steve greeted Maria before turning to him again. I got a call from Natasha a few hours back. She told me I would want to see something that happened here in New York. He looked around, his face losing the smile. I guess she was right. How the hell did she know about this before I did? She's out on a mission. Clint wondered, a little shocked. Captain Rogers just shrugged. I learned that it's healthy not to underestimate her, he answered, smiling once again. As I'm sure you know, she was the one Fury chose to get me up to date on the technology, the tactical training and all that. I may be a super soldier, but even I'm struggling to keep up. She's not exactly one you should trifle with. Clint snorted, thinking about poor Captain America being whipped into shape by Black Widow. Nat told him a few stories, but hearing from Cap himself that she was a harsh mistress was just too damn funny. He looked back around when he heard a tired sigh. They just don't quit, do they? Steve said, maybe more to himself than to anybody else. I guess it was already naive of me to think that I would be the last person to be turned into a super soldier. Sometimes I wonder if all this could have been avoided if the serum just didn't work on me like it did. You can't think like that, Cap. If you recall, there was already another super soldier out in the world, and he wasn't exactly a nice guy. Without you, we would all be doomed. Steve didn't answer, his eyes looking far away. Fury gave me some files about the experiments that happened while I was on ice, he said suddenly. Turns out I was just the first of many. The army tried to replicate the serum several times. And not just our army. The whole world was in a race to see who could succeed first. Eventually the programs began to branch out. One of those programs was called Weapon X. Apparently it was led by a man named Colonel William Stryker, and instead of trying to replicate the super soldier serum, it focused on mutants. Clint and Ramir remained silent, just listening. They tried to harvest and use the abilities of mutants, he continued, to use them as weapons. They didn't use only volunteers, and they weren't really concerned about following anything resembling human rights. Eventually the whole thing blew up in their faces and the program was shut down. Weren't any arrests though. It was super under the rug. Everything that happened here, it's probably just another branch of all those programs. Steve chuckled without a trace of happiness. Cut off the head, 2 more shall take its place, he said, quoting the motto of Hydra. It's funny how that seems to describe every single evil organization out there, isn't it? Clint just shook his head. "No, it's not funny at all," he said. "No, it isn't," Steve agreed. He then turned to Maria. "Did you get the ones who did this?" he asked. "Like I told Barton, only a doctor and a few of his guards," she answered. "But there were more out there. There's no doubt about it. Probably inside our own government," Steve said, his face hard. "And nothing will happen. Again, the people on top, the really guilty ones, won't get arrested. This investigation will be closed sooner or later, and someone will dig it up and continue it all over again." Clint could see why Natasha had sent Steve here. This was personal to him. And he supposed he could understand, somewhat at least. His very identity, Captain America, was probably being used as an excuse to allow these programs to even happen. All those people to die. To a nice guy like Steve, every death that happened here was being felt as if it was his own fault. He and Maria would have liked to tell him that this wouldn't happen, but by now they knew better. It was not only the fact that the guys who had been bribed to turn a blind eye on this had a lot of contacts everywhere, but also the value of some people who would find this research, no matter how many lives it ended up costing. Hulk's very creation was proof of that, as well as the creation of the Abomination, the name the army ended up giving to what Neil Blonsky became after the experiments with his own super soldier serum. And that pissed him off the same way he knew it would also piss Maria off. Because after these bastards finished playing their games, they would be the ones to clean up the mess and collect the bodies. "Ma'am, you'll want to see this." The three of them turned to see a young agent running in their direction, his face mixed between panic and anxiety. He handed them what looked like a newspaper. "What is this?" she asked, as confused as Clint and Steve were. "The first page, ma'am." Clint and Steve walked to Maria, each one on one side of her, trying to read the news. She let out a stream of curses, shocking the hell out of Steve. Clint would have done the same, if his jaw wasn't busy dropping to the floor. "Mutant Factory discovered in New York. A workshop of horrors," read Steve, shock on his face. "By Clark Kent," completed Clint, recovering the ability to talk as he saw who was the one who wrote it. "Son of a..." Steve glared at him. "Gun," he finished lamely. They became quiet for a few minutes, reading the front page headline of the New York Bulletin, printed not even an hour ago. It had the whole story of what happened here, and not only that, it had pictures of the lab, with the victims there, but without identifying their faces. Pictures of torture devices, images of the faces of Dr. Okamura and his henchmen, and if the pictures weren't enough, there was also a list of names of every single person involved in that, either directly or simply paid not to interfere. Names of important people inside the government, the police, the hospitals, the famous companies, all accompanied by pictures and documents proving everything. "Wait, he wrote that here?" Clint realised without even moving his eyes from the paper. "Before he called us, he sat... Oh, it's probably at the same table, and wrote this thing. How did he get those names?" he asked, looking at Maria. "There's a notebook here full of information. We couldn't look at everything yet, but those names were in there," she answered, still clearly surprised to her core. "Who are you talking about?" inquired Steve, confused. "The guy who made the call to the police. The one who found all this. He was the same guy who wrote this," exclaimed Clint, shaking his head. "I told you there was something weird about this guy. Probably the fact that he was looking at our eyes, answering our questions, all the while this thing was being printed." He turned to Maria. "Do you want me to go after him? He did sign the non-disclosure agreement." Maria gave a mirthless laugh. "Yeah, right after I clarified to him that we couldn't do anything about people he already told this to." She shook his head. "That fucker played me." "Do you want me to bring him back?" Clint asked. "It doesn't really matter if he signed this thing anyway. We can bring him here, stop this from spreading." "That won't be easy, sir," said the agent who brought them the newspaper, looking nervous when the three of them looked at him. "It's already everywhere. It's not just a printed, it's on the internet. We could try, but the damage has already been done." Hill stood in silence for a second, considering what to do. She looked at Steve. Clint could almost read her thoughts. On the one hand, they had been played hard by Mr. Kent, and they did not like looking like idiots. On the other hand, Mr. Kent had given them all the excuses they needed to pursue this to the end, no matter how powerful or high up the people involved were. Like Clint thought, Maria said, "No, we won't arrest him for an agreement he didn't break. We will, however, arrest every single one of these people." "Can I count on your help, Captain Rogers?" Steve's huge smile made them all forget about being tricked by Kent. Clint was never one to take him too seriously anyway. The sun was already out when Clark finally got back to his apartment, and, once again, there was someone already there. "So, did it work?" asked Jessica Jones, getting up from his couch. "I was beginning to think I was going to have to bail you out." Clark smiled and handed her the newspaper he had just bought. "Well, I signed a non-disclosure agreement, but they guaranteed me that they couldn't do anything about the people I already told," he explained while Jessica read the newspaper. But we'll see if the police come barging in later. You didn't mention me, did you? She questioned. No, of course not. And it's not like the guys that got a clear look at our faces or knew who we were. I told the agents that I suspected that all this happened when a mutant started trying to escape. The guys they arrested are probably going to think that too. Or at least think that we were mutants trying to wreck the place. Jessica smiled, and Clark was a little bit shocked when he realized this was a true, sarcasm-free smile. But then her smile faltered a little. I'm just pissed we let that bitch escape, she said. I still can't believe she got away after all that. While they were in the lab, completely focused on writing the story for the newspaper, Angel had woken up after the beating she took and ran away. Clark didn't blame Jessica, he blamed himself. If anyone should have heard her leaving, it was him. But he was too concentrated in what he was doing to pay attention, too distracted by the shock of seeing all those tortured people, and they severely underestimated the time she would take to wake up. That was the result. We'll find her, he promised, looking at Jessica. Did you find anything about the other guy I told you about? She nodded and opened her notebook. A little bit, but less than I'd like. Fucking guy's a ghost. Apparently calls himself Ajax. But it's probably a fake name because I couldn't find any trace from anywhere. His mother probably gave him a stupid name when he was born and he got so traumatized and now he goes around telling people his name's the same one as that fucking dish soap. Clark sighed. Well, he will turn up sometime. So will Angel. And we'll be there when it happens. He said, then looked at her serious. You know, I didn't thank you for what you did. I couldn't have saved those people without you. She just waved her hand. Forget about it, she answered, clearly embarrassed. No, I mean it. You didn't have to help me, or them, but you did. Taking a serious risk to your own life. So, thank you. And if you ever need my help, I'll be there. Saying this, he yawned and stretched his arms. I am so beat. I am going to go to sleep for a little bit. Wake me up if S.H.I.E.L.D. shows up to arrest me, would you? What, you're not going to kick me out? She asked as he disappeared inside his bedroom. What's the point? You can break the locks. Good night. Jessica snorted and sat back on the couch looking at her notebook. She still couldn't believe the day she just had. How did she go from trying to investigate her neighbour to busting a mutant factory alongside him? It was hard to realise the exact point when she decided to go with him, and more importantly, why she decided to go with him. To help him, to help those kidnapped people, to help herself. Maybe all that put together. And she did somehow accomplish all of that too. For the first time since Kilgrave, she had faced her fears head on. No hiding, no excuses, no panic attacks. She just went out there, against armed men, and fellow freaking strong ladies, and she helped save a lot of innocent lives. Just like her sister always told her she was capable of. And all that was because of him, her new neighbour, Clark Joseph Kent. Somehow he had done what Trish and even herself couldn't. He'd given her hope. Hope of changing for the better, hope of doing something that could get her out of the dark pit she was in. How he did that, she didn't know. Maybe it was charisma. Maybe it was just the fact that he was clearly a good guy. A guy strong enough to deflect bullets, start moving vehicles, hold an oil rig. A guy who didn't care one bit about what his gifts could give him, but instead how he used them for good. Jessica wouldn't be caught dead saying she looked up to him, but she recognised that he was an example she would like to follow. And so she did. Kilgrave's death had freed her mind, but it wasn't until this very moment that Jessica felt really free of him. Closing her computer, she lay back on the couch and closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, had a peaceful sleep. Natasha sighed, the slightest irritation creeping into her otherwise emotionless face. Mr. Clark Sullivan was a ghost. There wasn't a single piece of property in Cordova that belonged to a Clark Sullivan that matched the description she had had of him. No houses, no apartments, no businesses, no boats, nothing rented. Either that was a fake name or the alien she was looking for had lived there without leaving any paperwork behind. With the luck she was having, it was probably both. Cordova was a small city, but not nearly small enough to go knocking from door to door, asking if someone had seen a well-built man with dark hair and blue eyes. She drank a sip of her coffee, looking out through the glass window of the coffee shop she was in. Her computer was opened in front of her, the top-notch S.H.I.E.L.D. program running on the back, cross-referencing all the data she had on the alien with all the data she had on the city. Nothing was coming up. What to do now? Should she go back and talk with Chrissy, the waitress that gave her this information a little bit more? Maybe she left something important out. Should she request some agents to help her expand her search field? Decisions. There was also the possibility, quite high actually, that Clark had lied to Chrissy about living in Cordova. But Natasha didn't really think he lied. She didn't have any proof, of course, but there was no reason for him to lie to someone he supposedly cared about. Not on something without any importance like this. Maybe it was time to go back to the basics. What did Natasha know about him? Aside from his appearance, his abilities, and his past 2 jobs, there was only one thing. He liked to help people. That was the one constant she could identify that had happened in every single place she had managed to track his whereabouts. During his time in Arctic Cargo, he saved Dr. Foster and Miss Lewis's lives, even risking revealing himself to do it. During his time working at the pub, he helped Cass, saving her from the unwanted attentions of a rude trucker that had drunk too much. Both times he had used his powers, first to save and then operate on Dr. Foster, and then to throw the trucker out and make sure he stopped yelling obscenities and bothering the clients. Maybe that was it. Closing the non-helpful program, Natasha started to search for any freak occurrences that might have occurred on Cordova or any region around it. A car accident that was averted, a robbery stopped, a person rescued from something or from someone. Her search didn't take long until she found something interesting. Bright Arctic oil rig destroyed, fire caused explosion, but no deaths occur, Natasha read, beginning to smile. She called a waiter, lifting her mug of coffee. The young man, predictably, almost fell down and he was in such a hurry to please her. "Hello," she greeted, a beautiful smile on her face. "Could you give me a refill?" Of course, yes," the boy answered, blushing. "Say, I heard there was an accident on an oil rig close by," she said, while her mug was filled with coffee. "Did you see it happen?" The young man, ecstatic about being able to talk to such a gorgeous woman, was quick to answer. "I did. Yes, from far away, really, but the flames were just so high, it was a huge explosion." He was a bit too excited to be talking to Natasha to notice that he was sounding disturbingly happy about an explosion that could have killed a lot of people. Oh my, did anyone get hurt? Well, you see, that was the thing. No one died. People said, "You know what, forget it. I mean, you'll think I'm crazy." "Nonsense," Natasha countered, actually curious now. "You can tell me. I promise I won't think you're crazy." He seemed to ponder if that was true, but in the end he was powerless to resist. Okay. See, the guys who got out of there said they were saved by a man. An angel, some of them said, he whispered. Natasha got closer. "An angel?" she whispered back, maybe too close to the boy because he shivered a little bit. "That's what they said." Now, nobody believed them, not really. They said it was just the trauma talking. But I don't see how they could have escaped without someone's help. You see, they were trapped down there, in the middle of the rig, with no means to pass through the fire. Everybody said they were crazy, but nobody can explain how they got from down there all the way to the landing pad. And there's more. What? The waiter looked around to see if there was someone listening to them before continuing. The team that was on the helicopter that went there to rescue them also said they saw this angel. After they went all the way up and entered the helicopter, the oil rig began to collapse in on itself. They didn't have enough time to take off. So how did they? The angel! He held up the rig. The boy put both his arms up as if holding the invisible rig, with his bare hands, until they took off. What happened to him? He shook his head, losing his enthusiasm for a second. He didn't make it. The helicopter flew off and the oil rig exploded. He sacrificed himself. Natasha opened her mouth to ask something, but was cut off from a loud yell that came from the kitchen. "Thomas! Stop bothering the clients, get back to it." "Yes, ma'am," the boy answered. Apparently he was more afraid of his boss than he wanted to impress Natasha. It didn't matter. Natasha got what she wanted. Even more, not only did she have another lead, but she also learned something new about this alien. Something new and a little disturbing. She knew he was strong. Every witness told her that. But strong enough to hold up an oil rig? Strong enough to survive an explosion? Could Thor even do that? What kind of powers did this alien have? She needed to find him. The quicker, the better. Natasha didn't think he was a threat, not really, but being this powerful shouldn't be walking without any kind of supervision. For a whole minute, she considered what to do next, wondering if what she was about to do was really worth the trouble. In the end, she decided to go ahead and be done with it. She needed to see what happened on that oil rig, and there was only one person who had eyes on anything unusual that happened in the world since the Battle of New York. She grabbed her cell phone and made a call, uttering the words she thought she would never have to utter. "Stark, I need your help." Okay guys, it is FanFiction Reader here. We're going to call an end to this video right here. I hope you've enjoyed Chapter 6 of Avengers of Steel. Next chapter picks up a little bit more. We get introduced to a bit more characters. Tony Stark gets his first proper intro in the story, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I want to say a big thank you all to who left the comments, who liked on my Oncoming Storm video. That was very much appreciated. And I'll try and upload more videos in that one later down the line. But I've been very busy the last couple of days, and I'm probably going to be even more busy later down the line, so the results on this may vary. Hopefully they're not too bad though. Alright guys, if you want me to read any other story, then let me know which one in the comments down below. The most comment with the most likes I will consider. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you later.